Hello everyone. Today I will be presenting on malware and operating system security features focusing on three core defense mechanisms ASLR, DEP and SE Linux. Operating system security is about protecting system resource and user data from unauthorized access or damage. Malware remains one of the most persistent cyber threats we face. It's constantly evolving. Because of this, operating system comes with built-in defense that reduce the risk of exploitation before an attacker even gets close to sensitive data. Modern attacks increasingly target memory and privilege levels that rather than just files, which means security today has to be proactive, layered, and continuous. Not a single wall, but multiple lines of defense as shown in the illustration. So what exactly is malware? It's malicious software especially designed to harm systems or users. It's designed to damage, disrupt, or exploit devices. And it spreads through channels like email attachments, drive-by downloads, or infected removable media like USB drives. Malware threatens the three pillars of security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. At a high level, its life cycle is simple. It infects a system, spreads to others, and then causes damage, as shown here. Malware isn't one single thing, it comes in very different forms. A virus that attaches itself to files and spread when that file is executed. A worm. It self-replicates across a network without needing a host file. A Trojan. It disguises himself. It, dis- it disguises itself as a legitimate software to trick users into installing it. Ransomware. It encrypts your data and demands payment for the key. Spyware secretly monitors your activity while a rootkit hides deep, persistent access from detection tools. Keyloggers record every keystroke to steal your credentials, and adware floods your system with unwanted advertisements. Each of these has a different goal, but all of them compromise your system in some ways. Let's see how an infection actually unfolds. Step by step. First is delivery. The malware reaches the target system often via email or a malicious link. Next is execution, where the malicious code begins to run, then installation. The payload installs itself on the host machine. After that comes persistence, where the malware ensures it survives a reboot or an unattempted removal. Then the payload is triggered. This is the actual malicious action. And finally, damage. The system or data is compromised. Understanding this chain is important because OS security's features are designed to break this process at multiple points, not just one. What does a successful infection actually cost an organization or individual? There are six major impacts. Data theft, where confidential information is stolen; data corruption, where files become damaged or unusable; financial loss from both direct cost and recovery efforts; system slowdown as a resource gets consumed; unauthorized access, where attackers gain control of the system and the privacy violation; where personal activities exposed. These effects are exactly why OS level defense are so critical. So, how does OS defend against all of this? Operating system relies on six core features. authentication to verify identity, authorization to control what a user can do, access control to enforce permissions, memory protection to guard against memory based attacks, process isolation to keep programs from interfering with each other, and security policies that govern all of this behavior. On the right, you can see how this fit together architecturally. User applications sit on top, security modules enforce the rules, the kernel manages everything, and hardware sit at the base. Notice that security isn't one layer, it's embedded throughout the stack. Let's look in the memory specifically because this is where ASLR and DEP operates. Attackers frequently exploit weakness in how memory is handled. A classic example is a buffer overflow, where a program writes past its allocated memory boundary. This can lead to stack corruption, which can hijack the program's control flow entirely, letting an attacker redirect execution to their own malicious code. If memory isn't protected, this opens door to cut code injection attacks. That's why OS level memory protection shown where in this process memory layout, stack, heap, data and code segments is absolutely essential. What is ASLR? Now let's get into our first major defense, ASLR, which stands for Address Space Layout Randomization. The idea is simple but powerful. It randomizes the memory address of the key region like the stack, heap, and shared library every time a program runs. The purpose is to make memory address unpredictable so an attacker can't reliably guess where to redirect so an attacker can't reliably guess where to redirect execution. As you can see in this diagram, the same program run three separate times places its stack, heap and library in completely different memory location each time. That unpredictability is what blocks many memories based exploits from working reliably. How does this actually work under the hood? On every run, the stack base address is randomized. The heap start location shift, shared libraries load at random offsets, and on many load, even the executable's own base address is randomized. A technical called PIE. Look at the comparison here. Without ASLR, addresses are fixed. The stack is always at the same location, run after run. With ASLR enabled, those same regions land at unpredictable addresses each time. An attacker who has hard coded a target address into their exploit will simply miss. Like any other security control, ASLR has trade offs. On the advantage side, it makes memory based exploits far harder, costs almost nothing in performance, works transparently with existing software, and is widely supported across modern operating systems. But it isn't perfect. It can be defeated by memory leak vulnerabilities that reveal addresses to the attacker's entropy is more limited on older 32-bit systems. It isn't effective on its own without other protections, and misconfigured system can end up disabling it entirely. Now we have our second defense, that is DEP, which stands for Data Execution Prevention, where ASLR hides where things are, DEP controls what can run. It marks certain memory regions as non-executable, which prevents injected code from running in areas meant only to hold data. The purpose is straightforward. Stop injected malicious code from executing, even if an attacker manages to place it in the memory. This is enforced directly by the CPU using a hardware feature called the NX bit or XD bit on some processor, shown here as the chip flipping that bit to mark a page do not execute. Here's how DEP is applied in practice. Memory pages are tagged as either executable or non-executable. Code pages, the actual program instructions, remains executable because the program needs to run. But data pages like stack and heap are marked non-executable since they should only ever hold data, never running instructions. If the CPU detects an attempt to execute something from a non-executable page, it simply blocks it. You can see that permission map here. Green pages are allowed to execute, red ones are not. Let's compare what happens with and without DEP during an actual attack attempt. On the left, without DEP, the attacker injects code into a buffer. That code sits in data memory. The CPU happily executes the injected code and the attacker gains control of the system. A complete failure. On the right, with DEP enabled, the attackers injects the same exact code into the buffer, but this time it lands in a non-executable page. When the CPU tries to execute it, it blocks the attempt, raises an exception, and the process is simply halted. Same attack, completely different outcome. On third defense is different in nature. It's SE Linux or Security Enhanced Linux. It was originally developed by the NSA and is now fully open source. Rather than working at the CPU or memory level like ASLR or DEP, SE Linux is implemented as a Linux security module and enforces something called Mandatory Access Control or MAC. This is a big shift from standard Linux permissions. It restricts what process can do far beyond normal file permissions, even if a process is technically running on, as an authorized user. So how does SE Linux actually enforce this? Every access request goes through four stages. First, a subject, typically a process, request access to something. Second, its label or security context is checked. Third, that context is matched against policy rules defined by the administrators. And fourth, enforcement happens. The request is either allowed or denied based on that policy. The key idea here is that every single process request is checked against policy before it's permitted, regardless of standard file permissions. SE Linux can run in three different modes. Enforcing modes actively blocks and logs any policy violations. This is fully protection. Permissive mode logs violation but does not block them. It's typically used for testing and debugging policies before going live. And disabled mode simply turns SE Linux protection off entirely. In production environment, enforcing mode is the recommended standard. Let's now directly compare all three techniques we have covered. ASLR. ASLR's purpose is to randomize the memory layout working at the memory management layer, and it primarily prevents return to libc and ROP style attacks. DEP's purpose is to block code execution in data regions enforced at the CPU and the hardware level, and it prevents buffer overflow style code execution. SE Linux purpose is completely different. It enforces access control policy at the kernel security module level and it prevents privilege escalation. In terms of OS support, ASLR runs on Windows, Linux, and Android, DEP on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and SE Linux is specifically on Linux distribution like RHEL and Fedora. Notice these three techniques aren't competitors, they operate at completely different layers and are designed to work together. Real world applications of ASLR, DEP, and SE Linux. These aren't just theoretical concepts, they are deployed everywhere today. Windows has ASLR and DEP enabled by default. Linux uses ASLR, DEP, and either SE Linux or AppArmor. Android, built on the Linux kernel, enforces all three. Enterprise servers rely heavily on SE Linux to secure multi-user access, and platforms combine layered memory and access defense across massive shared infrastructure. WannaCry ransomware. Let's ground this in a real incident, the WannaCry ransomware outbreak of May 2017. It spread by exploiting an unpatched Windows SMB vulnerability, and within days it had propagated over more than 150 countries. It encrypted victims' file and demanded ransom payment in Bitcoin. Here's the critical takeaway. Systems that had been kept up to date with patches and modern protective like DEP and ASLR active were significantly more resistant to the exploit that WannaCry relied on. The lesson is clear. Regular patching combined with these OS level defense meaningfully reduces real world ransomware impact. Beyond the OS features we have discussed, good security also depends on user and administrator's habit. That means applying regular updates promptly, using a strong and unique password, running trusted and updated antivirus softwares, maintaining a firewall to filter unauthorized access, following the principle of least privilege by granting only necessary permissions, downloading software only from secure verified sources, and consistently applying software patches. These practices work hand in hand with ASLR, DEP, and SE Linux technology alone isn't enough. Standing back and looking at all these OS security features together, the advantages are improved overall system security, a reduced success rate for exploits, stronger memory protection, and better fine grained access control. But we should be realistic about the limitations too. None of these provide complete standalone protection. Configuration can get complex. There's some performance overhead, and ultimately, security still depends on correct user behavior. To recap everything we have covered today, we looked at malware threats and how they spread, the core goals of OS security, and then three specific defense techniques: ASLR, which randomizes memory layout, DEP, which blocks code execution in data regions, and SE Linux, which enforces mandatory access control policy. We compared these techniques directly, saw their real world application across Windows, Linux, and Android, and closed with security best practices. The key message: layered OS defenses, ASLR, DEP, and SE Linux work together to reduce the impact of malware. No single technique is sufficient on its own, but combined they form a strong defense in depth strategy.